In a world where a sensory epidemic with no cure spreads rampant, all corners of the globe face chaos. An organization called Anti-Epidemic Institution seizes power and control while families get separated and societies start to crumble. It's now in the hands of Murat, a former linguist, to unravel the cure for this peculiar disease while staying under the radar due to his special condition. Murat, a retired linguist, prepares for a self-experiment by checking his body temperature, which turns out to be normal. He commences the activity by listening to a cassette tape entitled Jabbers. In seconds, he starts panting and his temperature rises. He tries to bear the pain, but he's short on breath and his head overheats, so he hastily stops the experiment and places a cold towel on his forehead. Later, he records his experience on another cassette tape. For 7 months, Murat has been free from synthetic attacks but still experiencing the usual intense daydreaming. He also has elevated mental activity with recurring hallucinatory episodes. Fortunately, there have been no epileptic seizures for a while now. After a while, he heads out to the city, and while he walks, he recalls that the pandemic started 8 years ago, and they first called it the semantic virus. It's a mental disorder passed on through speech as the sound passes from one ear to another. Soon, the term evolved to ARDS, commonly known as jabbering, since infected people talk non-stop, which is also the most important symptom. Before they knew it, the whole system collapsed, emanating chaos. Unfortunately, there's no cure, but the Anti-Epidemic Institution, or AEI, which became the central organization of power, began enforcing wearing headphones, dividing cities, and creating safe zones, which escalated the people's mayhem instead. Everything is never the same anymore, especially Murat, since he's incapable of jabbering. On his way home, he sees Shule, a beautiful woman, reading a book at a bus stop. Murat has been captivated by her for a while, but he's never approached her. He's put out of his trance when the lady looks at him. He immediately leaves the stop when he spots a white flower called Snowdrop growing on the pavement. Feeling empowered, he tells the woman there's no service at this bus stop. The lady looks up at him, then resumes reading. Though Shule has no response, he continues his journey. He checks the guardhouse and sees a green pine tree freshener on the glass window, so he slips past it and discreetly signals the guard Sezgin. He drops by an abandoned room where he collects Sudoku books. Soon after, he arrives home and gives his mom the books and cassette tapes. She's glad to receive the books, then opens up about Makbule, Murat's aunt, who's been enthusiastically inviting them. However, the linguist ignores it. With this, the mom bugs her son to buy soap, even if it's only a few hours before curfew. In the end, the mom prevails. To express his rebellion, Murat opens one of the Sudokus and begins doodling despite his mother's warnings not to touch her books. She pushes him away, and Murat leaves the house. She's shocked when she sees that he has solved the Sudoku puzzle in just a few seconds. As Murat passes by the bus stop, he spots an envelope and discovers a letter from Shule, saying that she knows there's no bus, and that's exactly why she waits there. Due to this, his spirits lift as he tries to complete his errand. While queuing to pay for the soap, a woman standing before him turns to him and begins jabbering. Everyone is in a panic in seconds, and the store locks down. Unfortunately, a boy can't come out on time and the infected woman chatters at him. The clerk tries to open the barricade, but it's stuck, so Murat covers the boy's ears with his hands. Knowing this won't be enough, Murat puts his headphones on the boy and manually lifts the barricades just enough for the kid to escape. Unfortunately, he begins panting, and his temperature rises. Despite this, he manages to grab the soap and a pack of frozen goods. Then he locates an escape. He collapses on the sidewalk as he places the cold pack on his forehead. He hurries home but gets intercepted by Sezgin, who's trying to talk to him about something. The linguist disregards the man and strides away. Back in the market, AEI takes the infected woman. Afterward, Anton, an AEI chief of operatives, arrives, and Serat, his subordinate, reports about a man exposed to the jabbering but wasn't affected. The two mention Project X, and Anton orders Serat to investigate more. Meanwhile, Murat finally comes home, where he begins seeing apparitions of men stating how his cover is blown by saving the boy. Suddenly, his mom calls his attention and reminds him about some medicines. When she leaves, Murat doesn't find the men. That evening, Anton arrives at a house where he contacts Oscar, the commander, via radio to talk about Project X. The two discuss how Project X is a team of elite researchers involved in formulating the current system used to contain ARDS, especially in shedding light on facts and hoaxes about the disease. Oscar adds that information from the researchers ceased after the fire, concluding that they were also infected or passed away in the tragedy. The only missing person is Murat, the expert linguist who's the best in other fields such as physiology and neurology. day. However, the commander emphasizes that they can't be too hopeful about finding the researchers. Meanwhile, Murat's mom declares that they'll visit Makbule tomorrow. The following day, Anton meets with Serat at AEI to check the footage of the strange man who saved the boy in the market the previous day. They discover that the man's head is on fire, and he needs to cool it down immediately. At the same time, Murat and his mom arrive at Makbule's house. The guests haven't settled yet when Murat's cousin, Bezat, who's sick and unresponsive, suddenly yells, making all glass vibrate to the verge of shattering. Makbule begins sobbing in despair when Arif, her grandson, appears upon hearing his father scream from afar. The aunt and the teenager push Murat to help them, especially since he has a special body condition. Arif tries to corner his uncle by saying that the man knows something like a cure to the disease related to Ozgur, his fellow researcher, and Murat instantly falsifies this claim as he declares that his friend is now gone. However, the teenager doesn't budge and says he's been doing his investigation for a while now. He adds that he will contact Erol, a hacker leader who can infiltrate AEI's intelligence data. Afterward, Murat and his mom head home, but Arif approaches the linguist again, showing an old picture of Ozgur with a tattoo. The teenager hands over a small plastic of pills with a similar symbol to the missing researcher's tattoo. He informs Murat that his girlfriend's friend retrieved these pills from a jabberer, which makes the linguist doubt his friend's whereabouts. That evening, Murat reminisces about his past with his wife, Deria, a Project X member. He listens to previous voice recordings of his wife, who talks about their mission of helping the infected despite the danger. Finding his new resolve, he informs his mother that it's time for him to move. The older woman smiles in satisfaction as her son steps out of the house. Murat drops by the bus stop that Shule frequents, leaving a letter to meet the next day. Before he proceeds to his destination, he looks at the snowdrop to gather encouragement. On the other hand, Oscar contacts Anton about Murat's hospital records after the fire. He was admitted to the hospital for high fever 14 times, but was released because the high temperature was only on his head. With this new information, the chief hurries to the AEI facility with Serat to check the thermal feature of the camera that was used to record the footage in the market. Anton and his comrades confirm that the strange man in the market incident is indeed Murat by seeing only his head burn up upon hearing the jabbering. They also verify that the linguist is immune to the disease. At the same time, Murat meets Arif to ask the hacker for help in locating Ozgur. Later, Erol warmly welcomes the two, but the payment for the whole set of services is not something they can afford. Due to this, Erol offers a cheaper proposal. Either of his clients can infiltrate AEI with the hacker's help by making a fake identity of a former employee and opening the archive room for them. Murat volunteers to go but almost gets caught at the initial jabbering test by the entrance. Meanwhile, Anton approaches Fazil, a high authority at AEI, to present his discovery about Project X. As soon as the superior hears about Ozgur's team, he instantly turns glum and ignores the chief's report. When Anton insists on reporting more, he faces Fazil's scrutiny and the threat of deposition. The chief is left in anguish until one of his subordinates approaches him to give the information about Murat's mother's address. Anton commands Serat to assemble a small team that will raid the location despite Fazil's warnings, without knowing that the person that passed by him at the facility is Murat. On the other hand, Murat finds the archive with the guidance of Erol's man and immediately searches for Ozgur's file on the computer. He looks over the pictures of the autopsy result to discover that the body doesn't have Ozgur's tattoo. Afterward, he searches his records and gasps in shock as he finds footage of him in the market. He tries to delete his records but fails. Meanwhile, Anton and his team proceed to Murat's mom's address. The AEI officials raid the house, whereas the older woman maintains composure. Unfortunately, Sezgin blabbers about the old coal house that the linguist uses to move around the premises. At the same time, Murat proceeds to the bus stop to meet Shule. However, his letter remains unread. He soon finds the snowdrop trampled on the pavement, which shatters his spirits. Back in the house, Murat's mom sticks a red pine tree car freshener on the window to warn her son of the danger. Soon after, the man walks home in haste, unaware that Anton and his team are in his house. Murat finally notices the red car freshener on the window and stops. Contemplating if he'll surrender, he spots a snowdrop growing at the corner ceiling of the corridor. With this, Murat becomes more encouraged, thinking that if he gets caught, he'll never have a chance to be with Shule again. The AEI officials become anxious as their target suddenly stops moving. Suddenly, Murat runs away, finding a new drive to live his life, while the authorities chase after him. Moments later, he successfully escapes from his pursuers. Later that evening, he sits in front of a psychologist, speedily narrating the turn of events. The doctor thinks Murat is jabbering, so he puts on his headphones and is about to click an alarm to notify the AEI. Thankfully, Ertem, a seasoned psychologist and family friend, hurries out of the hidden room to prevent his subordinate from clicking the alarm. At his mom's home, Anton interrogates the older lady as she navigates the conversation craftily to avoid answering any of the chief's questions. Because of this, Anton orders Murat to confiscate all possessions of the linguist, especially Murat's cassette recordings. In Ertem's office, Murat narrates the turn of events, but the older man considers this as a psychological condition, prompting the linguist to leave. Ertem coaxes Murat and invites him to stay. On the other hand, AEI still lingers around the apartment of Murat's mom. With this, the woman pulls out a dead plant from its pot to retrieve a notebook for emergency purposes. At the AEI headquarters, Fazil reports to his superiors regarding the positive progress of the new laboratory they're building and the people's reactions to the rallying ban. Afterward, another high-ranking official, Suat, exchanges fake pleasantries with Fazil and sarcastically commends his decisions. Soon after, Fazil's secretary, Janan, receives notice of Anton's insubordination. Therefore, Fazil orders to give him the stubborn chief's records. Meanwhile, Anton sneaks into the restricted zone and returns home, where his caretaker, Chanel, angrily greets him, telling him he's late. The woman advises him to stop whatever he's doing and remain in the safe zone. The two argue and the woman gets upset, leaving the premises. On the other hand, Murat walks around the restricted area when a soldier demands his ID. However, an explosion occurs and the linguist takes the chance to escape. He enters a tattoo shop and discovers drawings of Ozgur's tattoo, the cat and the funnel. The store owner, Kinan, comes out of nowhere and threatens Murat with a tattoo machine. Still, he manages to explain that he's Ozgur's friend, and he comes to look for the man. Upon hearing this, Kinan turns off the machine and responds that the researcher is long gone. With this, Murat shows him the pills that Arif gave him. Kinan feels surprised to see that the symbols are copies of his funnel tattoo, so he ushers his guest to leave. Before Murat can go, Kinan's girlfriend enters the shop, narrating how +1, the militants, blow the AEI relief wall. The linguist prods the man about the source of the pills, and the woman intercepts them, saying it's available in District 6. Afterward, Murat and Ertem have dinner at a restaurant, and the younger man informs the psychologist of his intention to go to District 6 to search for Ozgur. Ertem warns him of the danger there, knowing it's filled with jabberers and deranged people, but the linguist stands firm on his decision. In Anton's house, he inspects the cassette tapes they confiscated. He discovers that a tape has a hidden label entitled Galata, so he anxiously plays it, thinking it's jabbering. However, it turns out that it's Murat's experiment recording during Project X's peak, saying that his blank page hypothesis is what he's leaning on. Due to this, Anton listens to the group of tapes and jots down the essential information that Murat narrates. Finally, he comes across the recording of Murat talking about the gift of cure that Ozgur has given him, declaring that now he's unable to jabber. On the other hand, Ertem and Murat share some drinks, and the psychologist consoles the younger man by saying that Daria's passing isn't his fault since she's already infected, making her take her own life. Ertem encourages the linguist to chase after what he truly wants. The following day, Murat goes to Arif to inform him of his plan regarding District 6. He also asks his nephew a favor and hands over a black plastic bag with Fiefdom written on it. Meanwhile, Anton arrives at the AEI facility and excitedly informs Serat about his investigation, but the subordinate ignores him, saying that Fazil is waiting for the chief. As soon as Anton arrives, Fazil firmly commands him to stop his investigation and hand over all of the evidence they found from Murat's house. The chief declares that the suspect escaped, and there's no evidence retrieved. Fazil assigns him to subdue +1 instead. However, the cunning superior orders Janan to end this matter by exposing that Murat isn't immune, and to keep an eye on Anton since nothing can go wrong before the opening of the new laboratory. Simultaneously, Murat asks Errol for a new ID and a makeover to get him to District 6. The linguist is willing to pay as much as the hacker leader wants this time, so the negotiation is closed speedily. At the same time, Murat's mom remains vigilant and glances over the window. At last, she finds a black plastic bag and scans her emergency notebook to follow instructions. Soon after, she sneaks out and proceeds to Makbula's residence. There, she meets her son, and Murat updates his mom about his plan. With this, he asks for the money he instructs her to bring. The two bicker until the older woman confesses that they're short on cash, making the linguist anxious about how he'll pay Errol. That evening, Makbula gives her nephew the money he needs. Consequently, Anton resumes listening to the recordings and soon discovers Ertem's name. A few hours later, he diligently watches videos of Jabber transformations and researches Project X. Unfortunately, accessing the files about the group is restricted. The next day, Murat's mother knows that her son's money isn't enough, so she hands over her precious necklace. As she anxiously bids him goodbye, Sezgin witnesses the events, tipping off Anton's team. After a short while, Murat arrives at Errol's location and hesitantly gives his mom's necklace to compensate compensate for the lack of cash. With this, the hacker provides Murat with a haircut and a new identification as Mesut Batiaj. He's also given a visa valid for all regions. Murat requests another one, but they're cut short as Errol detects AEI forces coming to their hideout. They hurriedly pack to escape, and Errol blames Murat for the trouble. However, Janan arrives at the location and confronts Anton that she's taking over. While the two speak, Murat comes up with an idea to divert their pursuers' attention. Suddenly, there are loud banging sounds, and the AEI follows it. However, they end up seeing an electric shaver in the metal locker, giving them a chance for Murat and Errol to escape successfully. At AEI headquarters, Fazil opens Ozgur's files and recalls how he exited a burning building while wiping blood off his hands. Meanwhile, Anton prepares a cake with candles on it. He wears his headphones and plays loud white noise. He proceeds to the basement where he hugs his wife affectionately despite the woman's jabbering. He goes to his son Kerem and greets him with a happy birthday, but the little one fails to comprehend as he continues jabbering. Anton agonizingly blows out the candles himself and feeds his family. He sobs in despair in the middle of the room as his beloved wife and son roam around while chattering. On the other hand, Murat travels to the train station to get to Zone 6. Then he panics as he sees numerous wanted pictures of him in the area. He hands over his new ID to the AEI agent for security check and goes undetected. However, he continues acting suspiciously due to nervousness, especially with AEI agents surrounding him. Suddenly, Shule appears out of nowhere and kisses him. Murat is taken aback and feels extremely happy. The composed woman holds his hand firmly, and the linguist begins floating in the air while holding Shule's hand. He smoothly lands on the floor and enters the train with his new love.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.